The shooting range. In this episode, Pages of History, the largest production tank, Tactics and Strategy, Propcast, and Metal Beasts, European MRCA. Today's Metal Beast is another long-awaited new vehicle, or more like new vehicles, because it's a whole family of third-generation multi-role combat aircraft with a variable sweep wing, the Panavia Tornado. 3 nations joined their efforts in developing this machine, and each of them got their own modification in War Thunder. Their stats are very similar, but today we'd like to focus on the most powerful version of them, the German IDS ASS TA-1. Its power plant is a twin bypass turbofan engine with afterburners. The fuel is stored in self-sealing tanks situated in the wing, the fuselage, and the keel. Additional fuel can be stored in external drop tanks. The wing sweep angle can vary between 25 and 67 degrees. The nose of the aircraft hides an onboard radar system, and under the cockpit, we can see 2 27mm autocannons with a total ammo pool of 360 rounds. The arsenal of suspended armament includes conventional and guided bombs as well as guided air-to-air missiles. There's a targeting pod for laser-guided munitions and countermeasure pods for defense. While this machine technically belongs to the fighter bomber class, it can't boast much of what fighters usually possess. Similar to the strike version of the Mirage, this Tornado's weapons are more suitable for self-defense. Moreover, it's way heavier than any of its counterparts, which makes air battles a pretty uncomfortable affair. And since its strike capabilities play the major role here, we'll focus on this aircraft's performance in mixed battles. As we've already mentioned, the Tornado can carry both conventional and guided bombs, laser-guided to be precise. The former option offers a nice number and caliber of ordnance. The plane can carry up to 12 hefty 1,000-pound bombs. The ballistic computer simplifies the task of sending bombs at tanks, but keep in mind that exiting dives is tricky for this machine, especially at a high speed and with a heavy load. Of course, this kind of ordnance isn't efficient enough against SAMs, and there's quite a lot of them at this BR, which means you'd be better off opting for the set of 4 laser-guided bombs. They're easy to use. Climb a bit higher, lock onto a target with your targeting pod, start a dive, drop your bombs, and pull up right away to get back to altitude. Remember that the Tornado has a hard time maneuvering at higher altitudes. If the target is right below you, you might want to use your brake flaps or even turn the thrust reverse on. As you're probably well aware, there are no perfect machines. The Tornado might be far from the best in air combat, but it does a great job as a bomber and a precision CAS plane. It'd be unfair to ask more of it. The Super Heavy FCM-2C has a special place in history. On the one hand, it's the embodiment of French engineering, the most advanced tank of its time, and even the largest production tank in the world. On the other hand, it's a victim of progress, a symbol of the inexorable course of time, and a tank that was late twice. The first time, the Char 2C was too late for the First World War thanks to competitors' efforts. Then it was late again for the Second World War, when these huge tanks got destroyed on a railroad, never making it to the battlefield. You might even feel sorry for the poor fate the Char 2C ended up with. But the tragedy of this official image hides a completely different story, where the FCM-2C actually played a great role. It had been made to be late, and it succeeded in this mission. It was hidden away from battles, and it never entered any combat. Here's how it all went down. Once the British presented their own diamond-shaped tank in September 1916, it created an issue of national pride. The French military demanded to create a better weapon at any cost. The project, however, gained some opposition right away. At the time, Renault was developing its light FT tank. They didn't want the super heavy monsters to steal all the resources, so they delayed sending the engine and transmission for the new tank on purpose. As a result, the prototype failed to meet the deadlines. On the other hand, when the FCM company finally delivered, their machine made such an impression in the military that the project gained too much favor to be cut down by competitors. Then, light tank lobbyists in the Army High Command employed a small trick. They chose the heaviest, most powerful version of the project for construction, the one named C. This version required scrapping the almost ready prototype and starting from scratch. Naturally, the tank was too late for the war, as intended. Now, what was so impressive about the Char 2C, anyways? Well, it was a true engineering masterpiece. It's the first ever tank with a 3-seat turret. It was propelled by 2 engines with an electric transmission, and there was a third auxiliary motor. Its crew of 12 included 2 electricians who could move around inside and perform maintenance on various units, like in a submarine. The commander used an incredible little device to watch the battlefield called a stroboscope. It was a cylinder with tiny viewing slits rotated by a motor so quickly it looked like there were no slits at all. From the outside, the cupola seemed like it was just floating mid-air. The Char 2C resembled an enormous 4 meters tall land ship. It could cross a trench so wide a light tank would fit below. One of the machines was retrofitted with a new turret housing a 155mm howitzer, which made the tank look even more terrifying. Obviously, it was a perfect tool for propaganda. The French happily shot on camera how the Char 2C crossed ravines, pushed trees into the ground, and broke walls. That might have been one reason why the army wasn't going to send the super heavies into combat in World War II. Losing them would have meant losing a symbol. The machines were sent south to prevent capture, and after France capitulated, they were destroyed. The largest and heaviest tank in history finished its 20-year-long service without ever taking part in any combat. Still, we can't say the Char 2C was bad or poorly designed. The tank played its role very well. It's just that the role itself was quite unusual. Close air support is a major part of any mixed battle in War Thunder. And who wouldn't want to experience the excitement of a winged predator choosing its prey way down below? So, we'd like to give you some tactical advice for piloting strike aircraft, starting with the prop planes today. They too can be divided into generations of sorts, so we'll be taking the German Junkers 87B2, the Soviet Il-2M Type 3, and the American Skyraider as representatives. First, there are low-tier strike aircraft and divers, like the Junkers. Their flight performance is too modest to fight quicker and nimbler fighters, and their armament is too weak to have good chances in a frontal attack, so you should avoid enemy aircraft at all cost. In the worst case, you may switch to the gunner view and keep your distance to the enemy, trying to lure them closer to your allies. Early strike aircraft are very efficient against ground vehicles, however, with even the smallest bombs being good enough for early tanks. Try to drop the load as early as possible to lighten your plane. Just don't spend them all on open-top targets like truck-based anti-aircraft guns. The bomb load is limited, and destroying unarmored vehicles with machine guns is equally easy, but the latter usually boast a hefty ammo pool. Medium-tier strike aircraft are much more dangerous for enemy planes. While they're still pretty sluggish and their maneuverability is limited by their speed, their autocannons can easily ward off any enthusiastic fighter. The legendary Il can also boast a thick layer of armor, which makes it much more efficient in frontal attacks. Bomb loads, however, don't differ much from the earliest counterparts. Yes, medium-tier strike aircraft carry more bombs and rockets on average, with higher calibers, but ground targets gruesome armor too. In practice, it means a higher demand for accuracy on the attacker's part. Anti-aircraft guns evolved too. Most of them are still open-top, but their armament is more dangerous now. Machine guns were replaced with cannons charged with larger high-explosive rounds. The best weapon against these are rockets with HE warheads. You don't even need to get dangerously close to use them. With some skill, you can launch them at a good altitude, land them somewhere in the vicinity of the target, and enjoy looking at the burning remains. Once you're out of rockets, it's time for some cannon fire. The IL's armor-piercing rounds can go through most light vehicles. Later strike aircraft have a special place among piston-engined planes, despite the fact that there's only a handful of them, and most of those are American. There's a reason why they remained in service even when all fighters switched to jet engines. For instance, they can boast an advantage in bomb and rocket loads. These single-engined hunters can carry as much ordnance as only heavy bombers previously could. Under perfect conditions, a single fully loaded strike aircraft can destroy nearly half of enemy vehicles all by itself. This advantage can also be a flaw, however. The bigger your load, the more time you need to deliver it, which means you'll have to survive enemy fire longer, and your chances of seeing the hangar screen before you finish are higher. Every time you approach a target on a late prop strike plane, you need to keep a lot of things in mind. Speed and altitude margins, major and secondary targets, types and numbers of weapons on board, possible placements of anti-air defenses, and, of course, getaway routes. It ain't easy, but if you do it right, a single machine heavy laden with bombs and rockets can bring you a lot of frags. Good luck in your ground strikes. Meanwhile, we'll answer some of the questions you ask us in the comments. The first question was sent by a player called Illyrian King. What makes missiles like Sidewinders or Sparrows increase in range with progressing variants when the shape and therefore fuel capacity doesn't change? Greetings, Illyrian King. They have a longer range thanks to the onboard devices being able to work longer and a larger fuel load, although the sizes of those missiles almost didn't change. Deafening Silence asks, why do some jets have a large tube protruding before the tail and rudder section, seen on Scimitar and Harrier GR7? Hi there! You probably mean the air intakes of cooling systems. They can be found in all kinds of places, but the tail base is often the best option. Another question comes from Illiger768. I was wondering what the difference between the two versions of the P-51D is, because I can't seem to figure it out. Hi, Illiger. The game actually has 4 versions of the P-51D. Their main differences are engines and flight performance. Cyber Architect writes, I noticed that in some videos that the Panavia Tornado didn't get into the German tech tree nor into the Italian. Why is that, Gaijin? Hi there, Cyber Architect. Sorry, where exactly have you seen that? Because it doesn't seem to be correct. The Tornadoes did make it to the British, German, and Italian trees. By the way, we know how many of you expected this family of aircraft. What do you think of it? Tell us in the comments. And the last comment for today was written by Wills. How long should we expect to wait to see our Moments on Thunder show, should they win? Hey, Wills. We can't really give you a certain time limit because it's flexible. We never skip truly unique moments, even when the next episode is already full. So, some replays may have to wait more than a week. Don't worry though. All winners always make it to the show. That's it for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, and the next episode will premiere the following Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT or noon Eastern Time. Subscribe and click the bell if you don't want to miss our next videos. Don't forget to assign some keys for shifting gears in your supersonic jets. Leave a like, share your thoughts and comments, and see you next week.